All right, welcome back, everyone. So, we are back with another episode of The Journey Within. I am your host, Andrea Escobar Logreda, spiritual medium and psychic. Each week, we connect with different healers, storytellers, and vision holders as they walk us through their journey within dark night of the soul experience, what inspired them to take a more spiritual journey and create light out of darkness. Now, today on the show, we are joined by Becca Williams, emotion therapist and educator who specializes in cannabis-assisted emotional and trauma recovery. Becca is a registered dietitian, nutritionist, certified emotional liberation facilitator, longtime cannabis advocate, and activist. I selfishly will say that I'm really excited to have Becca with us. Like, hey, how cool. It's April, Cannabis Awareness Month, and we're chatting together. But it's also really awesome because I feel like the world is waking up and we're now embracing psychedelics for the sacred plant that they are. And you, beautiful woman, I feel like you encompass that in such a beautiful way. So thank you for joining us, Becca.
Oh, thank you for inviting me, Andrea. It's beautiful. And April is Cannabis Awareness Month. I did not know that. I wasn't aware of that.
I was laughing with my brother earlier because I'm like, we made it a national holiday, but we're still federally illegal.
Yeah, there is a big irony to that,
Right?
isn't there? Wow. Well, I would just
Yeah.
want to put it out there and just say thank you so much for doing what you do in bringing teachers and educators around, feeling better to light. So thank you very much. However that might be, right? In
Oh,
the
thank
very
you.
many ways that you introduce the people who come on and all different portals that they offer. So it's terrific to be here.
I'm so grateful. Yeah, I'm so honored. It's so magical. Feel like the one beautiful thing about 2020 was you can connect with anybody now. Like it just makes it a little bit more Zoom, FaceTime, everything's an option. So thank
Truly.
you.
So,
Thank you so much for your time and energy. Before we start, because as you know, I want to like dive deep into your childhood and all of that, but I actually want to let people know what you're doing right now.
hmm.
You're working with plant medicine, you're working with spirit medicine, and you're really creating this sacred space where people can feel comfortable exploring. And I say exploring because you don't have to use cannabis or psychedelics. And that's something that you're very open about on your site. But you are very much about that exploring experience. And I feel like that's something that we all want at some point. We just want to we want to be curious and explore, but we're scared of, wait, what happens if we go too far? And you're almost cultivating this sacred space where people can go and not worry because the boundaries are implemented. So that, do you get what I'm saying? I don't know if that was just what I perceived.
Perfectly, yes,
Yeah.
and good perception on your point on your part. And with cannabis, the cannabis is one of my students. My students often have ways of saying things better than I do. Once where they're in the courses and learning how to deal with their emotions, and they put it so genuinely. Right there. And one of my students talks about the cannabis in this way, that it's not the engine, but it's the lubrication for the engine. And that's really the quintessential nub of it, that the work that I do, and we draw from the Kundalini discipline of the East, and that is Hinduism. And Kundalini, my work is called emotional liberation. It draws from that, and what we do is use an ambitious set of sound and body movements and breath work to actually bring up the difficult emotions and trauma so that we can release it. What I like to say is to meet and to greet and to release whatever might be bothering you, whether that's anxiety and fear or self-doubt, sense of unworthiness, anger, sadness, depression, guilt. And so what we do with this is we bring in cannabis, and I like to say what we start out with is microdosing, because what this plant ally does is it amplifies everything that we do. So there are people who come to me who say, well, I'm not I'm about the cannabis, and you can do everything without the cannabis, only that lubrication for the engine, most all of my students will attest that it is pivotal to the work that we do. And so yeah, what I do right now, Andrea, is I teach online. I moved to online. I moved my entire practice to online probably about 18 months ago, a little before COVID, actually. Yeah. And because the outreach is all around the world. And so in this latest course, we have people in Europe and in Asia and in Canada. And of course, we're here in America. And to be able to do that, I have students who are getting up at 6:30 in the morning to be with us in Asia, and people who are with us at 11:30 in the evening from Europe. And so, it's like a willingness and a commitment to do this work. And what is this work? As you have alluded, this work is really the journey of going inward so that we can reveal our shadow side and what all of that comes up. And that is, things that are attached to these emotions that come up. So, we're going along in life and something comes up, somebody says something or somebody does something, or we have an errant thought that comes up and we are off to the races. We are emotionally flooded. It just comes, we're triggered and we're emotionally flooded and we're going, what is that? Oh my, and so we're so flooded, I call it being in lizard brain, that we can't function. We can't interact with other people, or we explode, or whatever it is. So what we do in this work is we dial that back so that we learn this palette of the 7 difficult emotions, as I mentioned, so that they all have personalities and shades. And so when something comes up, and I have studied and I know what we call the language of emotions, and I can identify with what's coming up and why it's coming up, so that I can go in and say, why is that here? It's because that man who just said that to me was the same as my father used to say to me, da, 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 and he's going da, 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 and I'm just exploding because of that. So we learn to connect the past and the present and the future, because they're, in that time and space continuum, we can actually heal the past and heal as we move into the present, into the future as well. Yeah.
Oh, so
and
beautiful.
Cannabis helps all of this.
Oh yeah.
To do this work, to do this what we do is this expressive, active work that I mentioned.
I love what your students said. Props to them. That lubrication, I feel like that's such a beautiful analogy, because it is. I always look for a way when people are kind of like, I can meditate and not consume cannabis, but I love meditating and consuming cannabis. And it's funny that you're saying this. I used to not like to consume it with other people because I was absorbing their energies. And I realized that I was doing that all the time, but I was in such an automatic state that I couldn't realize it until I would consume with someone. And then all of a sudden I would start feeling fearful. And I'm like, I wasn't fearful. And then I'd talk to them and it was something that they were going through, or I'd start to get like rage. I'm like, what's going on? And it was something that I had been doing all my life. I was always kind of taking other people's emotions so that they wouldn't feel it. but I wasn't aware of it. And the minute I added that lubricant, it made me more, wait, this isn't cannabis doing this. This is Andrea doing this. And cannabis is just showing me. So it's beautiful that you are viewing it in such a, yeah, we are the engine. It's kind of just making it the journey in a little softer. It's more,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I don't want to say
Mm-hmm.
pleasant, because it's still going to be hard work.
Yeah, and I recognize what you're saying, because if you're a psychic, you are very sensitive, and so you're a what we call a highly sensitive person, which means you're likely empathic. I hear that
Yeah.
you're likely empathic. So I have a lot of people who come to me and say, I walk into a room and I can't. I'm very antisocial because I can't go into groups because I feel their energies, and it just drives me. I'm just get so anxious and upset. I have to leave. And so what happens is when we actually start strengthening that core, or that internal compass, knowing what we're feeling and why we're feeling it, then we start drawing boundaries. We start drawing energetic boundaries, as well as boundaries out there, in the physical world.
Yeah.
So when somebody says something and we don't want that, we're able to stand up and say we don't want that. We learn all of this stuff in my emotional expansion coursework. So a lot of it is, it's not just here, because we have to learn. So this is the cognitive. We learn the language of emotions and what each one of these means intellectually. But as you well know, we can't heal intellectually. We can't heal from up here. We have to go in here. So that's where this the Eastern wisdom comes in, the yogic psychology, if you will, to bring it in, that I, by the way, learned from my teacher, who's my colleague, because I continue to study with him, and he credentialed me about 4 years ago in this work. And his name is G.M. Khalsa, and he is a 40-year Kundalini master. And he's a kind of a white skinny guy with a long beard, and he wears a turban. He's Sikh, and he's the developer and creator of this incredible work called Emotional Liberation. And I so benefited from that and healed so much from it, that when I surrendered and everything around me fell apart, I came up and I said, oh my gosh, I don't want to be a television news producer anymore. I want to do something that's meaningful. I mean, not that can't be meaningful, but for me, it was, I healed myself. This is self-therapy at the best. That I healed myself of this trauma. I want to show other people how to do that. I want to teach other people how to do that. So Andrea, 7 years ago, I just erased what I was doing. Had been in media all my life. I worked for National Public Radio. I was in television for a lot of years as a producer and reporter and anchor, and all of that stuff. I just moved all that stuff away, saying, this is my passion. I never really knew what my passion was. What I thought my passion was how to make more money and to be seen by a greater number of people. And it was just all trying to feed an empty space here where I did not love myself. In fact, I loathed myself, coming from probably go there, but a very difficult childhood where I was conditioned to understand that I was nobody. I was worthless. I was defective in some way. And so growing up out of that muck, I continued as a young adult into adulthood to believe that about myself. And I say that my self-worth was so low that if there was a definition around not having any self-worth, that was me. No self-esteem at all. So what did I do? In order to get it, I went to the highest levels, as in putting myself out there in television news so that I could actually get that adulation. Rebecca, you're so smart, you're so good, you're so pretty, or whatever that was, and continuing to put that in. And I never believed that about myself. So having actually done this work, going through this work, it filled me up. It started, slowly, slowly, that coming from a place of self-loathing and self-hate to self-love, and it's an ongoing process for me and my students. I'm just, maybe a few breadcrumbs ahead of my students, enough to show them the way. I mean, that's what a student does, a teacher does. It lights the way, she eases the way, and so the learner can be on her or his path. And that's what I do these days. Yeah.
Oh, Becca, you're such a soul. Like, you are such a gift to this earth. I mean, this is taking us literally where I was going next, like, let's go into your childhood, but thank you for that, because I feel like that's something that we don't hear enough of. As a teacher, you don't need to have it all. And I love that you're saying that you're just a few breadcrumbs away from your students, because we all, like, that's something that I even had to, kind of, my ego was trying to tell me, no, this wasn't, I was doing an interview yesterday, and for some reason, Zoom wouldn't let me record. And in me, I'm like, oh my God, this looks so unprofessional. How can I show up like this? What are they going to think of me? And I had to kind of take a step back, and I'm like, ego, I know that you're just kind of waving this narrative because from past experiences, that's where you get your stories from. But this can also be an invitation to just say, hey, can you help me? And before it was something I internalized. The person was like, hey, Zoom's been weird. Are you getting an error? And I'm like, yeah, it's all good. I'll hit record on my end, and then I'll send it to you. And in the past, I would have been like, oh, what's going to happen? But it was this moment of, let me learn. And it ended up working out in my favor, the fact that all that happened, because it just created a more intimate connection before we started recording. And it's that thing, is recognizing that as a teacher, you don't need to know it all. You can't, because if you know
Well,
it
and
all.
what strikes me in regard to the story that you're telling is
Yeah.
how fast you were able to process that. And we're always going to have what I call, no matter how healed we are, there will likely always be wispies that come up like that. And so we're not head over heels, crazy, off the edge, anxious about it,
Yeah.
but there's stuff coming up, right? And it's like, oh, wait a minute, what is that? And you worked through that. You worked through that sooner than later. And it's all about awareness. And the awareness is that trigger can strike, and we may not notice it for a couple of days or weeks, or we may never notice it.
Oh yeah.
And the more aware we become, maybe it's 2 days, maybe it's 2 hours, maybe it's right while it's happening. And so you walk your talk. Look at the processing, the beautiful processing that you did.
Thank you. Well, I'm going to just tell people right now, this is my little plug of cannabis. It's probably because I love to smoke weed, and I welcome it. No, and I say this because I didn't feel safe ever being in the present. I was always trying to be 2 steps ahead of the person I was with, so that if anything went wrong, I could get myself out of that. I never wanted to, and this was something I heard growing up, you never want to get caught with your panties on your ankles. And that created a very fear of being present, being here with the person. I was always half here, half thinking about, what am I going to do next? And I am so grateful for cannabis for allowing me to feel safe in my body and in the present moment. Now, it's not saying that I'm constantly always consuming, but I do microdose, and we're going to talk a bit about this a bit more. And I feel like that's something that allows me to not stay so automatic in my autopilot, because that awareness, I feel like when we're in the automatic state, we can't be aware of things. And you were hitting on this. We can consciously know something. Consciously, I know that chocolate at 10 o'clock at night, the caffeine's going to affect my sleep. But my subconscious is like, well, you had a bad day and chocolate makes you feel better. Consciously, I can go and kind of read about it and know all that time until I can actually integrate it in my body and realize, oh, this. So I like to say that just to kind of let people know self-awareness is a practice. It's not a destination. There are still days that I don't notice things. Yesterday, it happened as well. I just wanted to share that with everyone. Don't feel like you just get there and you notice all of your stuff. I still have days where I'm like not even paying attention to where things are at. But thank you for that and for sharing that with us. I kind of, since you were talking a little bit about, you jumped ahead. You were like, let me tell you about 7 years. And I got super excited because I was like, we should just start there. But I'm like, no, let's go back. You talk a little bit about your childhood. And I know there was a lot of trauma that went on there. Can you take us back to growing up and when you started to feel like you didn't matter? Because I feel like we don't think that children can actually feel that because they're so young. And in reality, all of these emotions and, the emotions you were talking about, shame, guilt, depression, anxiety, they all start from, 0 to 7. So I would love to kind of go back to little Becca and where she was, and take us through that and kind of where we're headed.
Yeah, so there's a number of different kinds of trauma. So there's an acute trauma where it's just one-off, and maybe your family had a car wreck, or a man in a ski mask broke into your home and robbed you, or something like that. And then there's repetitive trauma where it might be milder, but it was all the time. And then there's developmental and complex trauma, where, so for me, I fall under that, where my mother was mentally ill. She was undiagnosed, but she was also alcoholic.
Okay.
And so she was self-medicating with the alcohol, and it would bring out her anger. And so it was a very dangerous and volatile and unpredictable childhood that I was marinating in.
Yeah.
And so I just was raised in this environment where it was unsafe. It's unsafe, very unsafe. And so constantly, and like a lot of people who can identify with this, that I had to just constantly scan the landscape, and I had to do a weather report all the time with her. So where is she? Is she coming at me? Is she going to say something? Is she going to erupt? So that was I was conditioned not to ever go in. Right? Never to go in, never the invitation to go in. I had to constantly be out and be very aware of the danger that might be up on me at any one time. And so with that, there were various episodes that, it was sort of like all kinds of episodes and then there would be one, and like this, and so there were all kinds of small insults and big insults. I remember once that she was drunk and she chased me out of the house. I had sisters, half-sisters, 2 half-sisters who were 4 years younger than me. They were twins. And I was kind of put in the place of the maternal role of taking care of these girls. And here I am, 12 years old, and they're 8 or whatever. And I pushed them out the door because she was coming after us, and got us in the car, sitting in the driveway in Sioux City, Iowa, and locked the doors. And we're sitting there, and she's walking around the car with a knife, with a butcher knife in her hand. And so, that was just, that was one of the, do I say high points or low points, but memorable, but it was trauma upon trauma upon trauma, Andrea. And so I had, that's why I had the whole ball of wax. And then of course, uh, she was angry, and what happens, there's, what am I thinking of? Carla, what's her name? Emotional intelligence, anyway. But she talks about people who are being angry or traumatized. So what happens is that if you're traumatized, you're either expressed or you're repressed. Okay. And my mother was expressed, and what these people who are traumatized do is they try to, Eckhart Tolle calls it a pain body.
Yeah.
So my mother was almost always in a pain body, and she would push me as a girl or as a child, constantly trying to make me mad. And it was almost like a mind game, a mental game. And so I knew that if I got angry in reaction to her doing that, something terrible would happen. So I had to bury all of that. Not unlike people who are with angry parents, where it was not okay to be angry in the household. You know, you could be sweet and you could be nice and have fun and be joy, but oh my gosh, if there was something that came up where you were sad or you were depressed or you were angry and you could not own that, you had to repress it. So here I grew up as an adult, and I had no idea what anger was. I would just fill my bag, and with, if somebody got mad, I would just keep putting it down. And then somebody would drop their pen and I would explode. And I have no idea what I was angry about. So anger was a huge thing, along with anxiety and depression. So no wonder I was so interested in studying this whole palette of emotions when it came up. Yeah.
Wow. I can't imagine unseeing that.
Mm-hmm. And the big deal today, like you,
Yeah.
is just when we tell these stories, we're not wallowing in them.
Oh,
We're not
no.
saying, oh me, oh my. It's almost an exemplar. It's an example of what we have come from and how we got from there. So that's what's so different from out there, right? And where you're at a family gathering, or you're at a bus stop and somebody's going, oh my neck, or he did this to me, or she did this to me, and it's just in our stories. But when you're healing, you're not in your story any longer. You can look back at your story and hold it up and say, this was what happened then, and to learn from it. Yeah.
I mean, the reason I say this, it's I can't imagine unseeing that. It's more of it brought me back to I was thinking of a time when my dad asked us to hide in the washing machine, in the dryer, and I didn't understand why. And I didn't want to, but then stuff started to happen that I got scared, and I was like stuffing my little brother and my stepbrother into the laundry because I'm like, I don't know. And I don't ever say this, again, like you were saying, as a pity me or feel bad for me. It's more of how much pain they had to be in, because what you were saying, that pain body, it's they're literally trying to provoke the pain they have almost in you,
so they can dump it.
Exactly.
So they can release it. But the dirty secret is not such a secret, is you can't dump it like that. You can't do that. And so she would self-medicate with alcohol and get even worse. And of course, that's what alcohol allows people to express, these emotions that are being stuffed all the time.
Wow. So I kind of want to just go, there's some questions I wanted to, but now I'm just kind of like, I want to dive deeper into this. And it's, how were you able to go into trusting people? Because
I didn't. That's an excellent question.
That's where
But I realized, I look back at this and have done a lot of spelunking through it, but understanding that at about 8 years old, there was something that happened that was, you can't trust anybody or anything. And to be safe, you can't trust anybody or anything. And so that was one of the pieces that growing up and being in adulthood, I couldn't trust anybody I just, and worst of all, I couldn't trust myself. So if you're talking about self-love and self-trust, and of course, if you're talking mystically or spiritually, it's about trusting the universe.
Yeah.
And so not having a trust for that invisible inner life that actually is the reason why we're here. So I had to learn all of that. Yeah.
Oof, that I feel like that's relearning that self-trust is very, very I mean, I think all journeys are like this, but I asked because that's something that I didn't want to recognize for a long time, that I didn't trust anyone. I didn't even trust myself. And
it was a very safe approach for a little precocious, smart girl.
So that's why I was so intrigued by you. Like, how were you able to, because I feel like everyone's journey to self-trust is so different, but what you said about 8 years old, something happened at 8 that you lost it. And it's like, I always thought that I had lost self-trust a lot older. And when I looking back and while I was started healing, I'm like, oh no, that literally started when I was 6. And when I would bring it up to my mom, she's like, that doesn't make sense. And I'm like, oh no, it very much makes sense. And, you know, kind of when she was ready to have this conversation, it's like, oh, wow, didn't know all of this. But it's interesting how when you're little, when you're born so trustworthy, you're literally born this pure little joy of light and
innocent,
innocent,
open-hearted.
All these things happen that start chipping away or adding things to that pure, innocent light, and things change. And it's kind of, that's the journey back of this lifetime, back to that pure light. So I'm just, wow, that I want to talk more about that journey of self-trust, because I know that it's going to be way more into as we get further down your journey. But you're 12, all of this is happening. When did you get out? When did you finally say, I can't do this anymore? Because it's also, this is my mom, I love her. And I say this because I lied for my dad a lot. I didn't tell my mom how bad things were because I was scared. I'm like, if I tell her, she already doesn't want us to see him because she knows that he's verbally and emotionally violent. If I let her know that now he's locking us up in the garage because that's his way of punishing us or whatever, we won't see him anymore. And that's where, again, I was the adult. I was trying to protect my dad and not get him in trouble. So I would lie and make things up. Oh, was he in a bad mood? No. And then if my brother said, well, he was, oh, it's because I was constantly trying to do that. How were you able to kind of?
So I had nothing. I had nobody, because my mother and father were divorced when I was about 3 years old. And so my father was very distant. He hated my mother, and by extension, he didn't like me particularly. He had custody of me at that time. One parent had major custody, and then generally the mother, you know, I was just those things, those days. And my father had custody of me during the summer, but I mean, he mostly wouldn't take it. He lived in another state, far, far away. And here I was, a little girl growing up, and my father would never pay any attention to me. And of course, the natural question is, what am I doing wrong? What's wrong with me that he doesn't pay any attention? Yeah. So then my stepfather was worse. His nickname for me in growing up was the big idiot. And you know, I mean, here I was, this small, precocious little girl, and he wasn't the brightest, you know, he wasn't the sharpest knife in the drawer. And he himself was damaged, right? Very damaged. And how could he feel better with this little girl popping up with these? Well, he just took me down peg after peg by calling me names, and his nickname for me ongoingly was the big idiot. So you can imagine that growing, I thought I was stupid. I thought I was dumb. And it was, I didn't have much to go on. I was pretty much, I don't know how I did it. Yeah, I know how I did it. I did it because of my soul. My soul, that's that small still voice somehow just pulled me along. And somewhere along the line, as a young adult, I learned that I was okay, good looking, right? I was okay. I had looks. And so it was like, we all growing up with trauma. It's like, what can I use? What is that? What can I use? Is it smart? Is it, being good in math? Is it being pretty? Is it being sexy? Is, what is it that we have? And so generally we take that and wrap and just be able to use that. Well, I was able to use that. And then one thing led to another. And in college, I studied journalism and realized that I liked to write and I was good at it. And then went into media. So because I needed love. And how could I find love? Because if I was out there, if I put myself out there, then people would see me and they would love me. I mean, I could earn, right? It's all about earning love. I could earn how am I going to earn my love, right? Mm-hmm. Is it because I'm going to be good looking? Is it because I'm going to give my body away? Is it because I'm going to be really smart and just outsmart everybody? Am I going to be so funny that I'm just going to have people in stitches everywhere I go? We just, we pick whatever we can use. And then as we move into this healing, if we get the opportunity to move into healing in this life, all of those layers get pulled off to where it's just the quintessential back to remembering, right? Remembering all the parts, the innocent, the looking through innocent eyes and being beautiful. And as we are as children, and then we forget all about that as we move into the difficulties of life.
Ooh, don't we? Wow. Thank you for that, because a lot of people, I feel like we don't constantly realize what we're looking for. And it's that searching outside of ourselves that continues to move us along and either align us into our path or kick us so out of our path that we will get literally knocked back into it. So
that's right. We're always on our path. We're
literally
the organism, the human organism, is always moving toward wholeness, whether you're actively doing it or not. And anything that you do to support that and energize that, you're going to go faster.
Mm-hmm. So this is actually taking us to your freshman year in college. Because from kind of what I was reading, freshman year in college, it was when you were in your 20s that cannabis came into your kind of life, and you started to consume it as a way to deal with some of the anxiety that you were experiencing and and kind of help you with where you were at and feeling a little bit more safe. Can you talk more about your journey and how different your consumption is now than how it was back then, but even just how cannabis came into your life?
That's an excellent question, because that's been the through line for me, is self-medicating with cannabis since I was 19 years old in college. And I was turned on to it by, I think, a guy that I was dating. I mean, I came from Sioux City, Iowa. I had not drunk or smoked or anything. I mean, I was pretty clean. And then I got into college and this happened. And then it was like, wow, it made me feel better. And then I realized sometimes when I was in groups of people, it didn't make me feel better, because I would grow anxious because of the social anxiety, just as you pointed out.
Yeah.
And so I just found that I was much better if I were medicating alone. But I did that all through those years, all through those black market years, right? That it was illegal, and going through the whole thing about trying to find the product, and you'd get hooked up with a supplier and go into some seedy neighborhoods. It was a whole thing. But the fact of the matter is that the difference between what I do now and what I did then is that cannabis essentially is palliative, which means that it made me feel better while I was under the influence. But as that influence waned, then the anxiety would come back. Now, the difference between that and what I do today is the work that we do in the expressive practices that we do. We are stirring up the energy body, and I'm speaking a little woo-woo here. I'm in good company.
Oh yeah, this is like all of.
But stirring that energy body up so that we can get at the trauma to release it. And doing that work is actually healing. It can be, I have to be careful about this word as a clinician. I have to be careful around using the word curative, but it can be absolutely healing. And so when you bring the cannabis in, it amplifies the healing work and so when the influence of cannabis goes away, you're still healing. That's the big difference in this work.
I love that you're saying that. And I want to ask you, I'm going to pivot a little bit before we jump back onto the questions I have, but this is something that I hear so often, and I would love for you to touch on this because you sort of have danced around it. I think one of my favorite things when people say this, because it just shows how we're still viewing cannabis on the perception of war from drugs. When they're like, well, no, cannabis makes me anxious. And I laugh internally because I'm like, wow, I didn't know it was like capable of doing all of that to you. Or like, cannabis makes me fearful. And can you talk about that? Because the emotions are already there. That's my perspective. If you smoke and you're all of a sudden super paranoid, I feel like you were already paranoid beforehand. And if you consume and all of a sudden you feel enlightened, that was something that was just needing to kind of like, the best way I can say this is the scratcher. When I don't even play lotto or anything, but you need to like scratch off that gray film to see the numbers underneath. I feel like that's what cannabis is doing. It's scratching off that layer so you can feel everything. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a lovely analogy. And in Western medicine, there's something called science. It's called default mode network in the brain, our default mode network, which means that's our everyday life. That's how we see everyday life. That's our default. Mm-hmm. And that we get up and we make coffee, and then I may be ruminating, I may be anxious, and there's all of these emotions among that default that are going on. And there have been at least a couple of pieces of research that shows that cannabis can alter or subdue that default mode network, the DMN. And so it's about taking that film off, to continue your analogy, so that we can be one with our higher self, essentially. And that's what, the research on psychedelics, what I call the big sister psychedelics to cannabis, we know that for a fact, that there are a lot of studies out there around that, what they do. And the fact that the endocannabinoid system, which receives the cannabis, it's hard to compare it to how psychedelics work. Now, there are some psychedelics that can access and go through the endocannabinoid system, but in this respect, it's not been studied that much. So what we understand is that cannabis can take that film off, so that we can feel the joy, the love, the wholeness, whatever that might be. And that while we're doing this work, that we're strengthening, and a big deal about the emotional liberation work that we do in my courses is that we strengthen the nervous system in order to feel, bring the feelings up and feel what we're feeling. So the awareness and the strength to feel what we're feeling. Because if somebody is traumatized, a lot of the movement and breath work can be very re-traumatizing. So it's very important to really caution everybody who does the work that stuff is going to come up, but you got to take baby steps. I'm a big believer in baby steps, because we're all 90-pound weaklings, these wimpy nervous systems that we all have. So immediately when we start, I do 4 8-week courses throughout the year. Mm-hmm. In studying the emotions and doing this work. And immediately we meet twice a week, and we dedicate one of the days to meditating and bringing in the cannabis and learning about the cannabis. But we do that together because the clinician in me knows that we need to change behaviors, and that is absolutely the hardest thing for human beings to do, is change their behaviors. So I want to make sure that we get that groove going. We get that neural network planted so that we can continue doing that. Yeah.
Man, you're blowing me away with all your answers. This is where I can say that you're a reporter, probably like, it's not even, now it's coming more of in an aligned way, because you're talking about something that you're passionate about, not to get external validation for it, which is so cool.
That is right. Yes. It's very different now. Yeah. You're absolutely right that I'm not out here talking and how good do I look? What did I say or whatever in order to get people's validation in turn. It's really about creating the shape of this body of work in order to help my community find me. And it's also new. It's, it's that, particularly with the cannabis. I mean, I get people who are saying, I tried cannabis from none to some to I'm an old hand at it. So, I tried it in high school, and oh my God, I thought I was going to get picked up, and I was scared to death, or I had a bad trip or whatever. I never touched it again. And now they're kind of tiptoeing their way in to people who kind of sort of use it for medical, right? And they this is intriguing to them, to people who use it always all the time, but have never used it in a conscious way. And this is the conscious approach to cannabis, and it's very different. And when we use it in the conscious way, we can use far less. And what I say to people who are interested in the cannabis and want to know more, it can be CBD to THC or a mix. So I have students who come on and use just CBD, because we know, the research is solid on this, that it relaxes the fight or flight response. So in doing this work, this beautiful work, they get relaxed, they get more spacious, they open up to the opportunity. So the plant is so adaptable in so many ways, Andrea. Yeah.
Oh,
Andrea, excuse me.
Oh, it is good. No, it is. It's so adaptable. I do want to kind of make a little, and I want to get your thoughts on this. This was something that for me was a little hard to swallow, because of just, again, media and how we put a spin on things. But CBD came out, and then everyone was like, I love CBD, but they were bashing on THC. And part of me wanted to say, if you love CBD, you love THC. I'm not saying you need to consume it, but if you love CBD, you love THC, because you can't say, oh, I love your hair, but I don't like you. So can I keep your hair and push you out the way? And the reason I bring this up is CBD works beautifully with THC, even if you're talking about like 0.01. And there's a lot of people marketing CBD and all of this, and you'll see a CBD that's like $10 and the other one's $50, and then you have people buying things that are not even CBD. They're rat oil and all these things. So what are your thoughts on that, on kind of the the way that we're dividing cannabis and almost saying like CBD's the good sister, THC's the bad sister, because, you know, there's light and darkness to everything. I say the way that I've looked at things, and this is something that I've kind of realized recently, it's there's a shadow to everything. The sun. The shadow of the sun's the moon. The shadow of the moon's the sun. And not a lot of people are like, what do you mean? And I'm like, well, do you see the moon during the day when the sun is out? Do you see the sun at night when the moon is out? And it's that beautiful thing of there's equal lightness and darkness to everything. But what are your thoughts on kind of that good sister versus bad sister that we sometimes see with CBD and THC?
I'm happy when someone interacts with CBD because it's a doorway to the entourage effect. Then also, as you know, hemp, which is primarily CBD, has to be 0.3% or less THC. It still has THC. I mean, I have worked with very sensitive clients who, even with that hemp CBD, a high quality hemp CBD, feel the effects of the THC. So I'm just happy that they have a foot in the door in regard to this. And if that's the way we need to go in through the back door, then it's all fine with me.
You're like, the more the merrier.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little different for everyone. So you talk about trying talk therapy and mindfulness meditation and feeling like you found some relief, yet the excess thoughts and kind of what we sometimes call that monkey brain, you know, you had just all that going on around in your head, produced a feeling of shame and failure for you. I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that, especially with everything that happened last year. You know, we kind of realized, oh, stuff can happen that pulls the rug from under us. And I was talking to someone the other day, like, I'm 40 and this was happening. I feel so much shame. But if I was 20, I wouldn't feel this shame. So I would love for you to kind of talk a little bit more about that and your experience with that.
Tell me your question again.
Oh, sorry about that. So you tried talk therapy and mindfulness and meditation, but you didn't feel like that was it. Like you found some relief and you were still looking for more. And I bring this up because, and you said this too, we can talk the trauma all we want, but trauma's in the body. Like trauma lives in our body. And I can't really go to my arm, hey, I know that someone hit you when you were little. Release the trauma.
Right.
So
right.
would you elaborate more on your experience with that and how that kind of pushed you to seek further?
Yeah, there's various portals for healing. They're innumerable. And of course, the biggest one in the Western mind is talk therapy.
Yeah.
And we've just, and we've known that about that forever, but it's talk therapy is going through a crisis of its own.
Mm-hmm.
I keep a close handle on circles because that psychotherapy is tangentially important to my work.
Yeah.
And what happens is that we go into talk therapy with our cognitive brain, our thinking. So we're going into and we talk about whatever is on our mind, whatever is, and we can go back to our childhood and talk about that. But remember, the healing takes place here. And so talk therapy, what I say, and I often tell my clients and students this, is that what we're doing in this work will soften us up, and it'll come from a place, we'll start learning how to come from a place like this. So it really enlivens talk therapy. If we have a therapist and it's ongoing, we're not going in there to talk from here. We're going in to talk about and I'm a big believer in journaling. And so, you know, the things come up and writing them down, and take that journal in with you to the therapist. And that can be helpful. And the mindful meditation, you know, if we have mindful meditation is all the thing now, isn't it? Everybody is talking about the mindful meditation. but what we know is that with pounding thoughts, and I did this myself, I pursued, if meditation was the answer, man, I was going to pursue it. And I did it through Kabbalah, which is the esoteric form of Judaism, Buddhism, transcendental meditation, but it was really about sitting and watching your thoughts move. You kept the thoughts going through, and so it's like it's training the mind. It really is a mind training, but it's just too hard in our busy, distracted world where, you know, we're on a screen all the time, and doing something, and it's do, and they say sit down and shut up and watch your thoughts go by. It's an impossibility for a lot of us. And so look at this. Oh my gosh, I'm in a room full of people who are meditating and I can't do it. So it's like, I can't do it. And then the shame of everybody else can do it, but I can't do it. So it works for, it's very popular, and I want to say it works for a lot of people seemingly.
Yeah.
And that is great to be able to find. You know, Buddhism is a whole like long thousands of years tradition to be able to make your way inward and get that grow and build that that center.
Yeah.
That inner compass. But a lot of people can't do it. And so this work, a lot of times I call it the unmeditation meditation, because it's not that. It's really the exact opposite of that. Man, it is meditation, but it actually engages the mind through movement, through sound, through breath work, and you can't go anywhere but in through this work. And it was my saving grace. It was my saving grace because I would dissociate when I would sit and try to do the silent, the mindfulness meditation, or it was just I just couldn't do it. So dissociation means that your mind takes you somewhere else. So I was redecorating my living room, you know, while trying to do that. Yeah.
I asked because that was something I related to so much, and I was so good at getting lost and dissociating from my reality because, like you, my dad wasn't an alcoholic, but I never knew what I was coming home to, and it literally be like I'm putting tomatoes away in the fridge and one tomato falls, it doesn't break or anything, but that would send him through the roof. So I was fearful, and being in that fearful state of always being ultra vigilant of my surroundings, I got really good at going elsewhere all the time. And when my therapist started to ask me to meditate, I was overwhelmed with shame because I'm like, I can't do this. No, you're just not trying hard enough. And I'm like, I don't think you understand how much I'm like, no. Yes. And I would feel broken and like there was something wrong with me. So I already had those feelings there, and it was just implementing all of that. So I love that you share this. And it's funny that you talk about Kundalini so much, because that for me was the only way that I was actually able to, I need to incorporate more than just sitting here. So I have a mala and I move it and I chant because I'm integrating more parts that then I am able to. But I love that you share that with everyone, because I think it is something that a lot of people experience sometimes. And it's so easy to just say, but it's easy for me, do it. And then you feel this, what's wrong with me? Why can't I do it?
And as we wrap up, I just want to extend, I have an ongoing event about once a month, and it's called Advanced Techniques to Strengthen Your Brain, Your Mind, and Your Nervous System. And it's just my gift to the community. And this is what we do. And people bring whatever is knocking loudest on their head. And in 75 minutes, we go through this work, and people feel good, and I hear from them that they felt good the following day and following days, and some really sensitive individuals weeks after. So there's always that opportunity just to go to my website and register for that.
I'll definitely include that in the show notes so people can go ahead and
beautiful
for that.
Yeah. It's just beccawilliams.org. Easy peasy.
So take us back to 2014. this was, and I'm going to just kind of make a preface for everyone. You weren't at all like woo into the spiritual when you
Oh,
decided
no.
to go see a psychic, which was not a modality that was in your realm, but you figured you had nothing to lose. Because that really was like, that kind of just flicked you into kind of where that trajectory. Could you take us back to that?
Yeah. So the universe has a way, and this is woo woo again, but the
Yeah.
universe has a way of nudging us to keep going.
Mm-hmm.
And I was, after, lifting up rocks and looking under and trying to find ways to feel better, I was really just ground down to nothing. I was feeling pretty awful. And I just asked, and I didn't really have a spiritual practice. I was just saying, show me the way, show me the way. And one thing after another would turn up, and that small, still voice would draw me. I would just keep kind of stumbling forward.
Yeah.
And one of them was, I was feeling really badly depressed, and a astrologer. I would meet with an astrologer every once in a while, because, and I don't do astrology anymore, actually, because I realized that whatever happens, I'm ready for it. I mean, it doesn't matter. I have a strong core. So yeah, this may happen, or that may happen, or there's a Mercury retrograde, and man, oh man, technology is just going bonkers and it's nuts, but I'm good. I'm centered. So astrology was there for me. It was really a wonderful tool for a long time. But this really gifted astrologer said, there's this psychic, like, okay. And she's very skilled, and she was on the island of Kauai,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe you should give her a call. And so I did, and what she did was, I just went with it, right? I went with it, Andrea. And I was hurting so much, and she would talk a little bit, and then she'd let go, and then she would call me back after she would like went into, and then she'd come back and she'd describe what she'd see.
Mm-hmm.
And she said she saw my child within, and all wrapped very tightly in a dark, what do I want to say, just a dark
Veil.
veil, right? And that she was there, and she so wanted to be out, and now you need to find a way to get her out. So then I said, okay, and started asking for more help. And one thing led to another, and there were signs of I had actually practiced yoga through my life since I was like in high school, but it never did anything for me. I mean, as far as my emotional, it was form and flow on the mat, and I looked great, and it was very flexible and felt good physically, but it never did anything for this up here. Well, here there were signs, and I was told I was guided to join a yoga place,
Mm-hmm.
and I did. And one that came up, and I had been going there for, I don't know, a couple of months, and I went in. It was in the evening, and it was run by Kundalini teachers, but they had all sorts of other hatha and restorative. And I mean, I always went for those. I never went for, I had Kundalini, those people are wearing white and they're doing this, that, and the other thing. And oh my gosh, no. And so I went in one night, and they were a very busy yoga center, and their hatha class was full, and their restorative class was full. And so the woman says, well, there's this Kundalini class. And oh man, okay, I'll go in. And it changed my life. There was the teacher was teaching from a book that was written by my colleague.
Okay.
And I went through this hour and a half, and it was just spectacular. It made me feel so good. And so I started inquiring about the book. I inquired about the man. before you know it, I was signed up with him. He just started this. His book was like new. He just put this idea that emotions is our inner guidance system out there in 2014. And I did a 9-month program with him, and I was feeling, oh my God, I was feeling so much better. And I went on and studied with him for like 4 more years. And then I continued, and he credentialed me. I started, training with him, and I was the first credentialed facilitator of emotional liberation because of this. And it's just, I'm just so blessed. I'm so blessed to be able to do this work.
That's so beautiful. Wait, I want to just say something because this for me stuck out so much. You reached out to him. So you go to this class, you read this book, and you reach out to him and you're like, I want to talk to you. That shows so much, because I feel like we read and we'll listen to a podcast or we'll see someone that, something that moves us, and we feel this pull to reach out, but then our ego is like, so that was why this was such a big, I really wanted to talk about this, because that you could have easily been like, well, who am I? And fed into that, but you didn't. And you just kind of went with it. And it literally just kept going and forming and forming. So what happens when you start listening to those little whispers?
That's right. Yeah. And in working with him, I incorporated a microdosing of cannabis, told him about it. And he said, Becca, that's not my thing, but if this is something that works for you, that's not my teaching, that's not my practice, but you go ahead and do that. And then he's inquisitive and curious, and I've given him research on it and told him all about it. And so just by including this, it just felt like I was making real progress, just leaps and bounds in this class of about 12 people. So, I was very excited about it. And it obviously I hit on something in regard to that. So the teaching of emotional liberation is very specific, and I've brought in that whole aspect of the cannabis medicine with it. So like that.
Thank you for that. I'm going to make a very bold statement. I actually want to thank your mom for everything that she put you through, because we wouldn't have the magical person that you are right now if you hadn't gone through all of that. What would you say, though, to the 10-year-old or 12-year-old knowing everything now? And this is speaking to anyone that's in it. Now that you know everything, what would you, if you can go and kind of go back to that 12-year-old or 10-year-old and say something?
In our work, which is called psychospiritual, we actually do this. So I lead people and guide people through a series of practices that take them back to their childhood. So one of a very potent practice is to go in, so you have hallways this way and that way, and you're here, and your younger you is this way, and your older future you is this way. And so we travel down that corridor to our younger self and hold our younger self and be able to tell them something that's going to allow them to know that everything's going to be okay. And of course, I was able to do that, to hold my child within and say, just everything's going to be all right, darling. It will be. Know that you will be taken care of and safe. And then being able to go to my wise future self and getting advice. So it's a beautiful closed circle kind of thing.
So beautiful. Thank you for sharing that with us. So before we wrap this up, you were ahead of the curve. And I say this because you conduct ceremonies in person. And then before lockdown, before everything happened, you decided to do it on YouTube. That's why I'm like, you were ahead of the curve. You were already putting this into motion before you had to kind of pivot in that direction. What brought that on? And the reason I asked what brought that on, there can be a lot of fear. Like, that's something that I I'm hosting a retreat for women, and that's all about connecting deeper with cannabis in August. And I've been sitting on this for a couple of years now, but a lot of people were saying, why don't you do something virtual? And on one end, I like community, so that was just not. But on another end, that's a lot of trust to have on here. And I want to know if there was ego resistance when or if it was just like, no, this is the next move, or kind of what brought it on? Like yeah.
Well, that's a very perceptive question,
Mm-hmm.
because here I am doing the thing that I love, and it's about desire. So that's another emotion that I didn't mention, but desire is the mother of all emotions, and we have to have a desire. I need to have a desire to pick this up and take a drink of it before I do that.
Yeah.
And what happened with my mother when I was growing up was that any desire I had, she squashed it. So that was a huge piece for me. What we call this a shame, we call it our soul is fractured.
Yeah.
And what we need to do is mend that fracture with our soul. And so during the course of that work, that's what I did. So it was really an adventure in self-trust, Andrea, really. So to start in Denver, when I was in Denver, I did the cannabis elevation ceremonies. And you just do it. You just run down to the deep end and jump off. And sometimes I had 1 people, sometimes I had 10 people. And after, with one, it's like, oh my God, there's something, I'm not doing it right. They don't like me or whatever. But it's like, oh, I did it. That one person just showed up so that I could get better and stronger at it. Yeah. And then continually increasing the number of people would come on. And it's, the same way with the coursework that I love it, and I want it so badly. And there are those wispies of shame that come up that, wonder if nobody signed. Now, there are people sign up, right? People come, but you just have to be with it. And what do you do in that space where the fear and the shame arise? Well, I lean on my practices that I teach. Yeah. And so I have really strong, potent practices. When that stuff comes up, I can go in and I do it and take a little bit of cannabis, and it blows it out. It blows it out. Yeah.
Okay. So I meant more of, and you answered partially one of the questions, but I meant more of, there's a difference between in-person ceremonies and then the virtual. And I say the virtual, the trust is more of, if I'm holding space for you physically, that can be also my own, like, I have more of a control of the situation, of the space. If this is virtual, there's only so much I can do because it's virtual. So that's where more of a, like, did you have resistance with that come up? Like, is this going to be less personalized than these in-person ceremonies? That's more where I have this ego voice telling me, no, this isn't as personal. It's not as beneficial. You're not connecting with the person. So I was more curious as to, I'm sure that love of, I want to share it with the world, because that comes from me, like, oh, I don't mind, I want to share it with the world. But then I have this disconnect sometimes where I'm like, I do, but I love when I am able to connect one-on-one with the person. So I was just curious as to that.
Yeah, it's another excellent question. The reminder is that it's not about us, Andrea. It's really about the work and being able, because it is, what I do is self-therapy.
Yeah.
And so I teach you how to go inward, and you're doing it. I'm holding the space for you. And so to be able to frame it truly like that, then it takes the trigger and the charge out of, God, I got to perform, right? That's old stuff. I got to perform, right? To be accepted. And also it really strengthens your skills in listening, because you have to actually deeply listen to people in what they're saying. Now, in the advanced techniques events, where we don't have a lot of interaction, I come and teach, but in my courses, we have a lot of interaction. That's where the magic happens in our group gatherings, where people are sharing what happened. They're sharing their challenges, their victories, and all wrapped in the vulnerability and being vulnerable in a group. And in our coursework, nobody sees anybody except me. And I made this because knowing about social anxiety, people actually choose their favorite mythological or fantasy creature. And so we have, let me see, we have like Inanna, we have Thunderbird, Ahmed, Garuda, Unicorn. I mean, and everybody picks their favorite mythological or fantasy creature, and that's the name that they use through the 8 weeks, and they pick a picture, and that's the picture that's up on the Zoom. So it has strengthened my listening abilities because I can't see anybody, so I'm listening for tone. I'm listening for where they're where they're at, the cadence, the rhythm, the hesitations in between. So it's made me a stronger teacher in that way, and coach.
First of all, thank you for humbling my ego with that. It's not about us, it's about them, because I felt that I was like, oh wow, I have been making it about me and not about the offering. So thank you for that. And then the listening piece is so beautiful. It's we learn to listen in different ways and to show up in different ways. So wow, what a beautiful answer. Thank you for that. That's like a loaded lesson all on its own for me. So I will be sitting with that for a minute. All right, well, we have been chatting for a while. So where can people find you? I know that they can go on to beccawilliams.org or .com.
.org.
.org. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then is there anything that you're working on right now that you would want to share with anyone? And where do you like to play on social so they can kind of hang
Thanks
out
for
with
that
you?
invitation.
Yeah.
So I have the ongoing event, the Advanced Techniques to particularly strengthen your nervous system. And all they have to do is just go to beccawilliams.org, and that's everything there. You can sign up for that. You can, if you have an interest in one of my 8-week courses, you can sign up for more information about that. It's just all there. It's so easy because you don't have to go to any other place except my hub, beccawilliams.org. And yeah, I'm on social media. I'm on Instagram. YouTube is probably bigger.
Okay.
LinkedIn is probably bigger for me. Those are Facebook, with cannabis. Forget it.
No, oh yeah. I'm with you on that one.
They don't let me do that. Mm-hmm.
I will post all of that so people can go ahead and click on, but definitely go check out Becca at beccawilliams.org. It is a hub, and I'm just going to put this little out there. Read her about, because this didn't even cover like a smidge. And yeah, no, it's a story that's really going to inspire you to not be afraid of healing, not being afraid of going into the darkness. I feel like sometimes it can be a little bit scary, and reading your story really made me feel, oh, this is an adventure, not, oh, I'm scared. So thank you for that. Thank you for your time and energy, Becca. It was a pleasure chatting with you. All right, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. I will see you next week when we have another beautiful soul talking to us about cannabis for the rest of the month. See you guys next week. Bye.